The gym at Fort Garrison still carried the echoes of yesterday. Rubber mats gave off a faint, sour odor from the sweat they had absorbed over years of drills and spars. Mirrors lined the east wall, reflecting the restless energy of recruits too young to know what real weariness looked like. Overhead, fluorescent lights buzzed faintly. The sun had just begun its slow climb over the Alabama hills, casting sharp beams through the high windows. The clock on the far wall read 7:50 a.m. sharp. As if on cue, the main doors creaked open, a long, dry groan that drew half-hearted glances from the gathered soldiers. Most of them were preoccupied, tying boots, adjusting gloves, talking smack beneath their breath. But even in that distracted moment, a subtle ripple moved through the room. It wasn't full silence, just that prickling awareness when someone unexpected crosses the line of familiar routine. He stepped inside slowly. His jacket was faded olive green, too old for modern issue. Heavy black boots struck the floor with deliberate rhythm. A plain, worn baseball cap sat low over his eyes, the words, Operation Desert Shield 1991, stitched in sun-faded gold. His gait was uneven, not from frailty, but from the weight of years lived hard and unspoken. Over his shoulder hung a battered canvas gym bag, seams patched with dull green thread. His right hand, half-gloved in a blackened tactical piece, flexed unconsciously, as if testing memory against movement. Private Travis Moreland noticed first. He nudged his friend Max with a smirk. "Check it out," he whispered. Grandpa brought his Vietnam flashbacks. A ripple of chuckles followed. Recruits leaned in the way young men do when arrogance masks uncertainty. Their boots gleamed with fresh polish. Their muscles were tight with youth unscarred. They had yet to meet failure that outlasted the next drill. The old man ignored them. He moved toward the whiteboard where the day's schedule was written in thick black marker. His brow furrowed beneath the brim of his cap as he read the names, and Time's lips moving silently. "Can I help you, Sir Sergeant Kyle Renair?" asked, his voice straining to balance courtesy with amused doubt. The man looked up. His eyes were gray clouded but sharply focused. Eyes that had once scanned kill zones, deserts, and alleys littered with the unseen traps of war. "Name's Raymond Booker," he replied calmly. "Was told there's an open combatives track starting today." Renair tilted his head. "This course is mostly for active personnel preparing for special assignment. Might be a bit fast-paced." "I'm aware," Booker said evenly. "That's why I'm here." A pause stretched thin. Booker didn't blink. Renair glanced toward Lieutenant Decker, observing from the bleachers. Decker gave a subtle nod, a faint trace of curiosity flickering in his expression. Renair shrugged. "If you're cleared gears over there, Matt's start in 10. Without a word, Booker moved toward the gear bench. Behind him, Travis snickered. "Think he knows what a clinch is? Probably thinks it's a dance move." Laughter followed, but it was thinner this time, uncertain at the edges. Booker knelt carefully. From his gym bag, he pulled out worn grappling shoes, the soles patched with care, and a folded mouthguard case. The precision of his motions spoke of long habit, not frailty. Private Luis Ortega, the youngest in the group, watched quietly from the corner. His gaze wasn't mocking. It was curious, tinged with something the others hadn't yet noticed: respect. As Booker changed his frame, revealed itself not frail, but weathered. Scarred shins, a long-healed burn across one forearm. Calf muscles corded like old steel cables. When he rose, the room seemed to pause, not in deference, but in awareness that something didn't fit the expected mold. "Warm-ups," Renair called. "Breckville's hip escapes. Move." The recruits dropped to the mats with youthful eagerness. Booker followed last, moving stiffly at first. His backward rolls were slow, deliberate. One shoulder clipped the mat wrong. "Someone call physical therapy," Travis muttered loudly. Booker said nothing. Later, during holds and escapes, no one volunteered to pair with him except Ortega. They moved slowly, awkwardly, but Ortega noticed something no one else did. Booker's positioning was exact. His weight shifted with precision beyond mere reflex. Every movement was intentional. At session's end, Renair gave his usual encouragement. "Long road ahead, some of us longer than others." Laughter. Booker approached Ortega. "Thanks for not flinching, son." "You've done this before," Ortega replied softly. Booker's eyes twinkled faintly. "Long ago." Then he walked away. His cane, which had sat unused on the bench, remained untouched. The air had shifted subtly. The recruits didn't yet respect him, but something told them perhaps they should have looked closer. The next morning dawned colder than usual for an early Alabama fall, 40 sinurigen before sunrise, the damp creeping into bones, not yet fully awake. Inside Fort Garrison's combatives gym, the fluorescent lights cast a sterile glare on the mats. The air smelled of leather gloves, chalk dust, and rubber tinged faintly with the sour tang of dried sweat. Recruits filed in, rubbing hands together, stretching with exaggerated bravado. Word of Raymond Booker's odd presence the day before had traveled well beyond the gym's walls. Across the base, young soldiers whispered half-jokes about the ghost of Desert Shield haunting their class. By 8:30 a.m., the mood had shifted. It wasn't outright mockery anymore, just a quiet edge of curiosity laced with skepticism. Today was contact day lives, sparring rounds, rotating partners every minute. Real movement, real pressure, no more theory. Sergeant Renier stood with arms crossed, clipboard under one elbow. Continuous sparring, he announced. Light contact, but control your ego. No one's getting carried out of here today. A ripple of chuckles passed through the room. Travis adjusted his headgear like a man prepping for the UFC. Max shadow-boxed with nervous energy. Few spared a glance toward Booker, except Ortega, who watched from across the room with growing interest. Booker stood near the edge of the mat alone. His faded gloves rested atop his bag. The same old cap shadowed his eyes. His stretches were deliberate, unhurried. When Renier posted the pairings, there was a pause. Booker first round with Max. A thin smile flickered on Travis's face. Here we go, he muttered. The bell rang. 1 minute on the clock. Max came in, fast jab, feint, low kick, trying to overwhelm. Booker didn't raise his hands. He moved just enough. The strikes grazed air. Max's tempo increased. A rear hook sailed wide as Booker pivoted, not hurried, merely patient. Each motion seemed to suggest, try again, son. Halfway through, Max charged, grappling for control. For a moment, Booker stumbled, or seemed to. Then his hips shifted. With one clean motion, Max found himself flat on his back, blinking at the ceiling. The bell rang. Silence. Next round, Travis. Let's go. Grandpa Travis grinned, bouncing in place. Ortega looked uneasy. He had seen what the others hadn't controlled beneath stillness. The bell rang again. Travis opened with a hard shoulder bump, close contact. Booker absorbed it, unmoved. Frustrated, Travis clinched, driving in again. Booker stepped sideways, body rotating fluidly. In a breath, Travis was off balance, knee to the mat, panting, not injured, simply outmaneuvered. What the hell was that? Travis muttered. Booker didn't answer. He offered a hand. Travis swatted it away. Next round, Ortega. They touched gloves. Ready, Booker asked softly. Ortega nodded. This round unfolded differently. They flowed grips, exchanged balance, tested. Booker matched Ortega's pace, not dominating, just guiding. His voice barely audible. Control, not domination. The bell rang. Ortega bowed instinctively. Booker returned the gesture. Around the mat, a hush had fallen. Renier scribbled on his clipboard, his gaze lingering on Booker longer than before. After drills, as recruits packed up, Travis loitered near the water cooler. I let him get that throw, he said too loudly. You all know that. No one answered. Ortega passed by. You didn't let him do anything. You got outclassed. Travis flushed. Keep talking, and you'll find yourself on the mat. I'd rather be on the mat than in denial, Ortega replied calmly. Across the room, Booker wiped down his gloves. He didn't speak, just nodded once toward Ortega. Outside, the sky had turned slate gray. Booker stepped into the crisp air, adjusting his cap. From a second-story window, Renier watched him leave. And for a moment, just a moment, an unsettled expression crossed the sergeant's face. Not fear, not guilt. Recognition. That night at the base rec center, Ortega stayed late. The public archives yielded fragments, an old article titled, The Invisible Wall, How Raymond Booker Stopped a Convoy with Bare Hands. His heart raced as he read. 2007 declassified 2019. Mentions of Project Dustlight and an instructor codenamed Iron Raven. Real name never fully confirmed, but footnotes pointed to Raymond Booker. Across town, Booker sat alone in a diner, untouched coffee cooling beside him. In his lap, folded neatly, an old operations map. A single name was circled in red. Not his. A boy he'd once saved. One who hadn't made it home. And tomorrow, as always, Booker would return to the mats. Let them laugh, until they learned why the floor listens to him. Friday arrived cold and bright. A thin layer of frost still clung to the training yard outside Fort Garrison's mess hall when the recruits drifted in for early chow. Steam rose from trays of scrambled eggs and sausage, mingling with the sharp scent of black coffee. But conversation wasn't about food. Word had spread. A new name had appeared on the sparring exhibition board late last night. Now a cluster of soldiers surrounded the announcement voices, low with disbelief. Renaer versus Booker. Wait, what? Travis all but choked on his protein bar. Max let out a low whistle. They're really going to feed him to the wolves, someone muttered. Private Ortega stood off to the side, eyes narrowed. The pit in his stomach tightened. Renaer's not just some drill dummy, he said quietly. This isn't a spar. It's a message. Exactly, Travis smirked. And nothing sends a message like folding Grandpa in front of the whole base. By 8:50 a.m., the gym was packed. Word had traveled fast, too fast. Recruits from other units crowded the bleachers, phones ready, eager for a spectacle. On the floor, Sergeant Renaer paced slowly. His gloves gleamed, tape pristine. His movements were tight, efficient, a man who had sparred hundreds of rounds and taught more than a few painful lessons. Across the mat, the gym doors swung open with a faint creak. Raymond Booker entered without fanfare. Same faded Operation Desert Shield cap, same worn gloves stitched at the seams. His steps were deliberate, measured, less a performance, more a ritual. There were no cameras in his mind, no crowd, only the floor beneath his feet and the weight of what had brought him here. Staff Sergeant Booker, Sergeant Renaer. To the mat called the assistant instructor. The two approached center. Renaer gave a respectful bow, then leaned in close. Ready when you are, sir, he murmured. Booker simply nodded. Begin. Renaer struck fast. Jab, feint, low kick. Fluid practice combinations designed to overwhelm. Booker didn't retreat. A subtle pivot, a sidestep, each movement precise, exact. The kick grazed empty air. Renaer adjusted snap hook, elbow, check body shot. Booker absorbed the impact, feet shifting only inches. Then with one seamless motion, Booker redirected the sergeant's wrist, pivoted deep, and swept his rear leg from beneath him. Renaer hit the mat flat. Hard. A collective gasp rippled through the gym. The sergeant scrambled to his feet, cheeks flushed. He charged again, this time with force. A shoulder slammed into Booker's ribs. A sharp, low kick caught him off balance. Booker dropped to one knee. Travis clapped mockingly from the sidelines. Down goes ancient history. But Booker rose, not rushed. No anger, just presence. He brushed off his knee, eyes calm. A faint smile, not arrogance, but knowing, crossed his face. Renaer circled cautiously now. Neither moved first. Then Booker stepped in quick, calm. Left hand feint, right hand locked Renaer's wrist. Pivot, sweep. The sergeant hit the mat again, breath knocked from him. This time Booker didn't strike. He placed an open palm over Renaer's chest right above the heart. The message was clear. I could have. For a moment, no one spoke. Then quietly, Booker extended his hand. Renaer took it. They rose, bowed, no pretense. Mutual understanding hung thick in the air. On the sidelines, Travis sat frozen. Max's smirk had vanished. Across the gym, Ortega whispered to himself, now they know. Afterward, Booker sat at the edge of the mat, unlacing his gloves. Renaer approached, no longer cocky, just human. He stood beside Booker for a long moment before speaking. Sir, why'd you hide it? Booker didn't look up. He folded his gloves once, twice. Because he said softly, you only listen when someone reminds you what you forgot. Later that afternoon, across the base, clips of the match began circulating. Private chat groups buzzed. The throw, the open palm finish, the silence that followed. And though few admitted it, the recruits of Fort Garrison walked into the next day's drills, different, quieter, eyes sharper. Because some lessons aren't taught, they're remembered. The following Monday dawned clear and cold, 34:30 at sunrise. A brittle wind swept across Fort Garrison, rattling the flag atop the mess hall and stirring fallen leaves across the pavement. Inside the combatives' gym, the recruits moved with quiet purpose. Gone was the brash swagger of previous weeks. The buzz of weekend clips still lingered. Grainy footage of Raymond Booker dismantling Sergeant Renair now lived on phones and in private chats. But no one spoke of it aloud. Some nodded to Booker when he entered, others looked away unsure of how to bridge the gap between past mockery and new respect. By 11:00 a.m., the gym's rhythm shifted. Without warning, a group of officers entered command staff in full uniform. At their head stood Lieutenant Colonel Maddox Silver Oak Leaves, gleaming beneath the fluorescent lights. Behind him walked a tall man in civilian clothes, broad-shouldered, a slow, deliberate gait betraying decades of service. Retired Brigadier General Hugh Carver. Recruits stiffened instinctively. Conversations ceased. Sergeant Renair set down his clipboard, face unreadable. All personnel front and center, Maddox ordered. The squad scrambled into formation. Booker, as always, stood at the far left, arms behind his back, gaze level. General Carver stepped forward. His voice was gravel but carried the weight of command. "I don't normally visit training bases," he began, "but I've come today because I heard a name I haven't heard in almost 20 years. A ripple moved through the room. Carver's gaze swept across the recruits, then settled on Booker. "Staff Sergeant Raymond Booker," he said. A few recruits glanced sideways. Whispers stilled on lips. In 2003, in the hills of Kunar Province, an engineering convoy was ambushed during a night maneuver. Booker, assigned as close quarters defense for a forward operating team, rescued 5 soldiers from a burning wreckage without body armor, armed only with a combat knife. Carver paused. His eyes narrowed with memory. 2 weeks later, he disarmed a suicide device using a canteen strap and a broken wrench. His after-action report read only, "It worked." Uneasy laughter rippled faintly through the room, nervous, unsure. Carver continued. He trained over 100 men in unarmed subdual techniques during his 17-year career, methods still used in classified infiltration programs today. He turned to Maddox. "Tell me, Colonel, what does your manual say about a man like that?" Maddox cleared his throat. "It says..." "He writes the manual, sir." Carver smiled faintly. Across the formation, Travis swallowed hard. Max shifted uncomfortably. Even Renair's shoulders seemed to sag under the weight of the moment. Booker remained still, calm, present. General Carver approached him. "You didn't think I'd miss the day they finally looked you in the eye again, did you?" Without hesitation, Booker shook the general's hand. "No, sir. No smile. No performance. Just earned respect." After the briefing, the recruits clustered loosely in the back of the gym. Ortega broke the silence first. "He taught people who taught our instructors." Max nodded slowly, "And we laughed at him." Travis stared at the floor. "Yeah, we did." Later, Renair approached Booker alone near the supply bench. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I know," Booker replied. Renair hesitated. "I was wrong about you." "You weren't wrong," Sergeant Booker said. "You just didn't look. Most people don't." That evening in the chow hall, subtle changes took root. Booker's table was no longer empty. Ortega sat beside him, asking about weight transfer. Another private quietly slid him a tray of cornbread. Even Travis hovered nearby, not yet ready to speak, but no longer laughing. Across the hall, Maddox turned to Carver. "You think they understand now?" Carver nodded. "They'll forget his name one day, but they won't forget the moment they learned to see beyond the uniform." He sipped his coffee. "And some of them," he added, voice soft, "might even learn how to fight." That night in his barracks room, Booker sat on the edge of his bed. In his hands lay a worn leather pouch containing old dog tags. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. For the first time in years, a knock came at his door, gentle, uncertain. It was Ortega. "Sir," he said softly, "would you teach me what they didn't put in the manual?" Booker studied him for a long moment, then he nodded and opened the pouch. The wind carried a sharper bite as October deepened. 34 degrees at dawn, the cold seeped through seams and fatigues curling beneath collars and cuffs. But outside the combatives' gym at Fort Garrison, 2 silhouettes moved through the morning fog, silent figures stretching beneath the faded glow of overhead lamps. Ortega had come alone at first. No fanfare. No rank. Just the simple request, teach me what they didn't put in the manual. Now, days later, a third figure had joined, then a fourth. A ripple, not a wave, quiet change. Raymond Booker taught without ceremony. No lectures, no titles, only movement and stillness. Breathe before you move, he would say softly. And when you move, listen to weight, not noise. They practiced balance drills, joint manipulations, redirection. The lessons were not about domination. They were about presence, about knowing when to yield and when to hold. Ortega called it invisible fighting. Booker called it listening to weight. By the second week, half the squad was showing up unannounced at 600 boots muffled on the mat, eyes sharpened by humility. No orders had summoned them. They came because something inside compelled them to. Booker never raised his voice. He moved among them, making small adjustments. A shoulder nudged half an inch, a wrist turned subtly, a breath slowed. During one drill, Ortega stumbled in a pivot and fell flat. Booker knelt beside him, adjusted his foot placement with 2 light taps. Again, he said quietly. This time, Ortega flowed through the motion. The room clapped, not because they were told to, but because they felt the moment. From the upper gallery, Renier watched each morning, arms folded, jaw tight. What had begun as curiosity was evolving into something deeper. During the official hand-to-hand assessment, Booker watched silently from the wall as recruits entered the gauntlet. 3 opponents, no resets. Ortega moved first, balanced, low present. He didn't overpower. He adapted. Against the final opponent, he used no strike, just a shift in weight, letting gravity and grace finish the encounter. Applause followed. Booker nodded once. Ortega bowed. Next came Travis. Gone was the showboating. His movements had purpose, not ego. He absorbed, hit countered without haste, moved with intent. When he finished bruised but standing tall, he didn't look at the evaluators. He looked at Booker. Better, Booker said. You're not chasing power anymore. You're inviting it. Travis beamed, not as a soldier seeking approval, but as a man who had learned to see. After the assessment, Renier gathered the class. You've learned grips, locks, counters, but all that fades in combat, he said, pacing slowly. What doesn't fade is standard. He turned to face Booker. And this man didn't come to teach us technique. He came to remind us what the standard used to be, what it should still be. Renier stepped aside. Staff Sergeant Booker, the floor is yours. Booker walked slowly among them. No raised voice, no grand gestures. Everything they taught you was meant to keep you alive, he began. But survival isn't always about beating the other guy. Sometimes it's about holding the line inside yourself. He stopped. I've watched men win fights and lose their integrity, seen bones break while the soul hollowed. That's not victory, that's noise. His gaze met Ortega's. To fight like you belong here, you must fight like you belong to something greater. A team, a family, a purpose. He paused. That's what they never wrote in the manual. Later that afternoon, a quiet ceremony was held in the quad, not formal but necessary. Each recruit received a patch, not standard issue. A raven in flight talons open, stitched over a mountain. Beneath it, know when to strike, know when to stand. Renier handed them out. As the last patch was given, General Crowder approached with a small velvet box. There's one more, she said softly. Inside lay a silver challenge coin, Special Forces insignia on one side, the words Instructor, Class Black, Echo, Ghost Hand, You Are Not Forgotten on the other. Booker held it for a long moment. Then he closed his hand around it. Weeks later, after the class had rotated out, the training room looked emptier. But something lingered. A simple plaque had been mounted on the far wall. The Booker line. Not every fight needs noise. Some need someone who knows when to hold the floor. Below it hung Booker's original gloves, stitched frayed but whole. Now every new class began with a moment of silence facing that plaque. Some recruits didn't understand it right away. Some thought it tradition, but others had heard the story, and one day they'd pass it on not as myth but as standard.